she was strapped to a bed, not because she was violent, not because she was a danger to anyone, but because she kept saying the same thing over and over, and no one believed her. Kharkov, Building 7, 17 operatives, 3 of them are still in the ground. The nurse stepped back. The attending physician wrote 2 words in his chart: active psychosis. Her name was Captain Renata Solís. 12 years in Army intelligence, 2 classified deployments. 1 commendation she could never hang on her wall because the mission it came from officially never happened. And now she was locked inside Calloway Ridge Behavioral Health Center, a quiet, white-walled facility on the edge of Roanoke, Virginia, while her husband signed paperwork outside. While her 9-year-old daughter sat in a car in the parking lot, asking why Mommy wasn't coming home. While somewhere, in a building that doesn't appear on any government map, or could a file with Renata's name on it was being quietly buried. The doctors said she had broken. The army said she had been honorably discharged. Medical reasons, no further comment. Her husband said he didn't recognize her anymore. And Renata Solís. She sat in a locked room. She wasn't screaming, she wasn't crying, she was waiting, because she knew something that every single person in that building did not. She knew they would come. She just didn't know if they would come in time. Stay with me. Because what happened inside Calloway Ridge over the next 41 days is one of the most documented cases of institutional failure, classified cover-up, and family destruction this country has never been allowed to talk about, until now. You have to understand who Renata Solís was before any of this happened, because that part matters. That part is the part her husband Thomas would eventually forget, the part her daughter Lily held on to like a lifeline, and the part that Dr. Amara Elise Voss, the psychiatrist assigned to her case, would spend months trying to reconstruct. Renata grew up in El Paso, Texas, 3rd of 4 daughters. Her father, Ernesto, was a retired Border Patrol officer. Her mother, Claudia, taught 3rd grade for 31 years. They weren't a military family, but they were a disciplined family, a finish what you start family. A your word is the only currency that matters family. Renata was the one who took that most seriously. She graduated high school ranked 2nd in her class, turned down a partial scholarship to UT Austin, walked into an Army recruitment office on a Tuesday afternoon with her acceptance letter in one hand and a pen in the other, and she signed her name before the recruiter had finished his opening sentence. Her mother cried for a week. Renata didn't look back once. By 26, she had a language certification in Russian and Farsi. By 29, she was embedded with intelligence units in locations she still cannot name. By 31, she was Captain Renata Solís, decorated, trusted, the kind of officer that senior commanders moved chess pieces around because they needed her on the board. She met Thomas at a military family event in Fort Belvoir. He was there supporting a college friend. He was funny, warm, and completely unintimidated by her rank, which was, she later told her sister, the only qualification she had for a husband. And they married in 18 months. Lily came 2 years after that. And for a while, a real, genuine while, it worked. Thomas ran his own landscape architecture firm out of their home in Culpeper, Virginia. Renata deployed, came back, deployed again. They had a rhythm. It wasn't perfect. No marriage built around long absences and classified phone calls ever is. But it was real. And they fought about dishes and missed school plays and the fact that Thomas felt like a single parent every 3rd year of their marriage. Real fights, human fights. And Renata always came home. Until the last time. She returned from her final deployment on a Thursday in November. Thomas was at the airport with Lily. He'd made a sign. Lily had drawn a soldier on it with a yellow crayon that was supposed to be Renata's hair. It was the kind of moment people take photos of. But the woman who walked through those arrivals doors was not the woman Thomas had dropped off 11 months earlier. She looked the same dark eyes, same measured walk, same way of scanning a room in under 3 seconds that used to make Thomas joke she'd make a terrifying librarian. But something was off. He couldn't name it. Not that night. She hugged Lily too long. She held Thomas's hand in the car the whole way home and didn't say a word. She ate dinner and smiled at all the right moments. She read Lily a bedtime story, twice, because Lily asked, and tucked her in the way she always did. Forehead kiss, lamp off, door cracked 2 inches exactly. Then she went to the kitchen, and she stood at the window for 3 hours. Thomas found her there at midnight. Her coffee had gone cold. She hadn't moved. "Renata?" She turned, looked at him like she was surprised he was there. "Come to bed," he said. "I will," she said. She didn't. The first real sign came 6 days after she got home. Lily's class was doing a Veterans Day project. The teacher, Miss Hargrove, sent a note home asking if any parent veterans would be willing to talk to the class. Lily begged Renata to come. Thomas thought it would be good for her. Get her out of the house, back into the world. Renata agreed. She sat in front of 22 7-year-olds and did fine for 11 minutes. But then a boy named Marcus raised his hand and asked if she'd ever been scared. Renata stopped. She looked at Marcus for a long moment, and then she said very quietly, "There's a building in eastern Ukraine, 7 floors. The windows on the 4th floor are all blown out except one, and behind that one window there is a man who has been waiting for 3 years to be brought home, and nobody is coming for him." The room went completely silent. Ms. Hargrove stood up. Lily stared at her mother. Mon Thomas, who was standing at the back of the room, felt something cold move through his chest. Renata blinked, looked around, said, "I'm sorry, I don't know why I said that." She laughed it off. Ms. Hargrove laughed it off. The kids moved on, but Thomas couldn't move on. Because on the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, and Renata said to the windshield, not to Thomas, to the windshield, "We left him there. We had a window. We left him." Thomas gripped the steering wheel, and he didn't say anything. He didn't know what to say. Over the next 3 weeks it got worse, not dramatically. Not the way it happens in movies where someone snaps overnight. It was quiet and steady and deeply frightening in the way that only people who love someone can truly be frightened. Renata started checking the locks, every lock, every night. Front door, back door, the windows in the garage, the deadbolt on the basement. Not once, 3 times. Always 3 times, always in the same order. She stopped sleeping in the bedroom. Thomas would wake at 2 a.m. and find her on the couch facing the front door, eyes open, completely still. She started writing things down on yellow legal pads and then burning the pages in the backyard fire pit. Thomas once tried to look at what she was writing before she burned it. She caught him. The look she gave him wasn't anger. It was terror. "Don't," she said. "Please, you cannot know this. For your sake." "What, you cannot know this?" Thomas told himself she was processing, told himself this was trauma, this was transition, this was the normal cost of doing what she had done for 12 years. He read articles online, he called the VA resource line and stayed on hold for 40 minutes before hanging up. He tried to be patient, but patience has a wall. And Thomas hit it on a Sunday morning in December. He came downstairs to find Renata in the kitchen with every cabinet open, pulling out canned goods and stacking them in a specific pattern on the counter. Lily was standing in the doorway in her pajamas, watching. "Mommy, what are you doing?" Making sure we have enough, Renata said, not looking up. Enough for what? Renata stopped, turned, looked at Lily with an expression Thomas had never seen on her face before, a raw, exposed, fractured kind of look, and said, "In case they find out where we live." Lily started crying. Thomas took Lily upstairs. Hay put her in front of a cartoon, came back downstairs, and had the worst conversation of his marriage. Thomas didn't want to do it. Let that be clear from the beginning. He wasn't a cruel man. He wasn't a man who didn't love his wife. He was a man who had watched the woman he married spend 3 weeks checking locks at 3 a.m., terrifying their 9-year-old with warnings about people finding them and writing things in legal pads that she burned before anyone could read them. He called his mother-in-law, Claudia, first. Claudia drove up from El Paso, spent a weekend, cooked, talked to Renata in the gentle, measured way of a mother who had seen every version of her daughter, came to Thomas on Sunday evening with tears she was barely holding back. "She needs help, Thomas," Claudia said. "Real help, not the kind we can give her." He called Dr. Preston Hale, the family's primary care doctor. Dr. Haley did an in-home evaluation, 40 minutes, asked Renata a series of questions, while Thomas sat in the living room listening to muffled voices through a wall. Afterward, Dr. Haley sat across from Thomas at the kitchen table. "She's describing events with an extremely high level of specificity, locations, operational details, names of individuals," he said. "The pattern is consistent with what we see in stress-induced, delusional thinking. She has constructed an elaborate internal world to process whatever she experienced overseas. The details feel real to her, because her mind has made them real." Thomas stared at the table. "So she's not making it up? She's not lying to you?" "No, but that doesn't mean what she's saying is happening." Dr. Haley referred them to Calloway Ridge Behavioral Health Center. He made it sound like a formality. A few weeks, stabilization, medication adjustment. They would help her process, help her land. Thomas could visit twice a week. Lily could visit on Sundays. It was supposed to be 6 weeks. Thomas drove her there on a Wednesday morning. He had told Renata it was a follow-up appointment with a specialist, and he hated himself for that. He had told himself it was kinder. He had told himself that if he told her the truth, she would refuse, and she needed this, and sometimes you have to make a choice for someone who can't make it for themselves. He told himself all of it. Renata sat in the passenger seat in her good coat, the navy one she wore to Lily's school concerts, and looked out the window the whole drive. She wasn't angry, she wasn't manic, she was just quiet. When they pulled into the Calloway Ridge parking lot, she looked at the building for a long moment. Then she looked at Thomas. "You should have just told me," she said. "Renata, I'm not angry." She said it like a woman who was used to being let down by people who thought they were protecting her. I'm not angry at you." She got out of the car. She walked toward the entrance. She stopped once at the front door and looked back at Thomas still sitting behind the wheel. "Don't tell Lily I lied to her," she said. "Tell her I'm at the hospital. Tell her it's my heart. She'll understand a heart problem. She won't understand this." Thomas nodded. Renata went inside. The intake process at Calloway Ridge took 4 hours. During that time, Thomas sat in a waiting room with pale green walls and a television playing a home renovation show with the volume too low to hear. He filled out forms. He answered questions from an intake coordinator named Bev, who had the practiced kindness of someone who had delivered bad news so many times it had become a script. He called his mother. He called Claudia. He called his business partner and cancelled 3 client meetings. And then he called Lily's school to let them know Lily might be late some mornings for a while. And somewhere in the middle of that call, He started crying in the parking lot, sitting in his truck, hand pressed over his mouth so the person on the other end of the line wouldn't hear him. He was doing the right thing. He was almost certain he was doing the right thing. Inside the facility, Renata had been assigned to Ward C, Behavioral Stabilization. Her assigned psychiatrist was Dr. Mara Elise Voss, 38 years old, Johns Hopkins trained, 8 years at Calloway Ridge, having moved there after a stint at Walter Reed, where she'd worked specifically with returning combat veterans. She was good at her job. That mattered. She wasn't careless. She wasn't dismissive. She walked into Renata's room on that first afternoon with a yellow legal pad of her own, which Renata noticed immediately and did not comment on, and sat in the chair across from the bed.
I know you didn't choose to be here," Dr. Voss said. "No," Renata said. "That's fine. You don't have to have chosen it for it to help you." Renata looked at her, something measured in her eyes, reading her. "What do you already think is wrong with me?" Renata asked. "I don't think anything yet. I'm listening." "What did my husband tell intake?" Dr. Voss was quiet. "He told them I was describing classified military operations as though they were currently happening."
That I was paranoid about being found, that I'd been doing this for 3 weeks and it was escalating. "Is that accurate?" Renata said nothing for a long moment. Then, "Some of it?" "Which part isn't?" "The part where it's a delusion." Dr. Voss wrote something on her pad. Renata watched her write it. "You just wrote, 'fixed false belief,'" Renata said. Dr. Voss looked up. "That's criterion 1 for delusional disorder," Renata continued. "I looked it up before I came here."
"I knew this was where I was going." A long silence. "You knew your husband was bringing you here?" "I'm an intelligence officer, Dr. Voss. I've spent 12 years reading people and situations before they announce themselves." She leaned back against the pillow. "I also want you to know that I'm going to tell you everything. Every detail. I'm not going to protect the operations anymore. I'm done protecting things that aren't protecting me back." Dr. Voss set her pen down. "Okay," she said.
"Oh, you're not going to believe me. Try me." Renata looked at the window, at the pale afternoon light, at the parking lot where her husband's truck was probably still sitting. "It starts in 2019, she said, with a man named Dmitry Bolkov, and a building in Kharkov that officially doesn't exist." Dr. Mara Voss had worked with 47 veterans at Calloway Ridge. She had heard elaborate stories before. The mind under extreme stress is a remarkable architect. It builds structures that feel unbreakable, details that feel photographic, timelines that feel immovable. She had learned not to challenge the structure directly. You don't demolish someone's coping mechanism with a wrecking ball. You examine it. You walk around it. You look for the foundation. But Renata Solís was different from the first session because she wasn't defending her story. She was presenting it like an officer briefing a superior, controlled, sequential, with the kind of emotional flatness that doesn't come from psychosis. It comes from someone who has reported things so terrible, so many times to so many people who could not respond to them, that the emotion has been placed somewhere else for safekeeping. "In March of 2019, Renata began, I was attached to a joint intelligence cell operating out of a facility in Lviv, Ukraine. The mission tasking was counter-proliferation, specifically tracking the movement of a Russian arms broker named Dmitry Bolkov, who was believed to be brokering access to Soviet-era biological material to a non-state buyer," Dr. Voss wrote, her face neutral. The cell had 6 members, 2 Army, 2 from a unit I cannot name, 1 contractor, and a Ukrainian liaison named Vassal, who I will tell you was the bravest man I have ever been in a room with. What happened? We tracked Bolkov to a building in the Saltivka district of Kharkov, 7 floors, former textile facility. He was using the 4th floor as a staging area for the transfer. And you went in? We weren't supposed to. Her jaw tightened, just slightly. The first crack. The mission parameters were observation and reporting. We were not authorized for interdiction. But one of our cell members, I won't name him yet, he made a call. He said Bolkov was moving the material that night, and if we didn't act, it was gone. So you went in? We went in. A long pause. Vasil didn't come out. Dr. Voss stopped writing. He was hit on the 3rd floor stairwell. We had him. We had a window to extract him, and the decision was made by someone above my rank and outside that building to pull us out without him.
See, because extracting a Ukrainian national who was an unregistered intelligence asset would have created a diplomatic event. They left him. They left him. And I was told, explicitly told, that if I reported the full sequence of events to anyone outside the cell, I would be held personally responsible for the breach of mission parameters that put us in that building in the first place. Dr. Voss put her pen down for the 2nd time. Captain Solís,
I want to ask you something, and I need you to hear it as a clinical question, not a challenge. Go ahead. The level of detail you're describing, let's see the building, the floor, the name, the specific diplomatic language you're attributing to a decision made in the field, these are things that, from a diagnostic standpoint, are consistent with what we call a constructed false memory. The mind fills in detail to complete a story it needs to believe. Renata looked at her. Oh, I know what it looks like, she said. I'm not saying, I know what it looks like, Dr. Voss. Do you know what it feels like to tell the truth and have it look exactly like a lie? Do you know what that does to a person? Silence. It makes you stop talking, Renata said, for a very long time. And then one day you realize the silence is killing you faster than the truth ever would. So you start talking again, even when you know no one will believe you. The sessions continued over 12 days. And with each one, Dr. Voss found herself doing something she was professionally trained not to do. She found herself pulling on threads because the details were too consistent. In 12 years of clinical practice, she had sat with delusional patients whose stories shifted. Names changed, locations drifted, timelines contradicted themselves because the brain cannot sustain a false, elaborate architecture under repeated examination. Renata's architecture did not shift. She named the same 6 cell members in the same order every time. She described Bolkov's physical appearance, right-handed, a scar below his left ear from a dog bite, a watch on his right wrist, with the consistency of a police witness statement. She described the 4th floor window with the single intact pane in the exact same language every time. She never added detail to make it more convincing. She never dramatized, she reported. Doctor. Voss began making notes she kept separate from Renata's official file. She wasn't ready to say she believed her, but she was no longer certain she didn't. Meanwhile, outside those white walls, everything Renata had built her life around was coming apart. Thomas had told Lily her mother was at the hospital for her heart. Lily, who was 9 and very smart and deeply attuned to the specific texture of adult lies, did not fully believe this. She started waking up at night. It started asking to call her mother every day. Started drawing pictures of a woman behind a window that she would bring to Thomas and say, "Is this what it looks like where Mommy is?" Thomas would look at the drawings and say, "No, baby, it's much nicer than that." and feel something break a little more each time. He visited Renata on the first allowed Tuesday. They sat across from each other at a table, in a room with a large window and a staff member visible through the glass. Renata looked at Thomas for a long time before she said anything. "How is she?" "She misses you. She wants to call you." "I know. I want that too." A pause. "Tell me she's not scared." Thomas opened his mouth. Renata read his face. "Okay," she said quietly. "Tell me what you need from me." "I need you to—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "I need you to work with the doctors, Renata. I need you to try. I need you to let them—" "I am working with the doctor." "I mean really work with her. I not just tell her the same story." The silence that followed was the kind that changes the shape of a relationship. "Thomas," Renata said, "I need you to hear me say something, and I need you to decide right now, today, whether you believe me or not. Because I can't keep living in the middle of your doubt." "Renata, do you believe me? Yes or no?" Thomas looked at his hands, and in the 7 seconds it took him to answer, Renata watched something finalize between them. "I believe that you believe it," he said. Renata nodded slowly. "That's not the same thing," she said. "I know." "Okay." She stood. "Thank you for bringing Lily's drawing. Tell her I drew one back." She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "A woman standing at a window, looking at the sun. Tell her the window's bigger than it looks." Thomas picked it up. Couldn't speak. Renata walked back to her room without looking back. It is a specific kind of grief, watching someone you love exist on the other side of a wall you built. Thomas Solís knew he had built it. He had told himself he was protecting Lily. He had told himself he was protecting Renata from herself. And there is a version of that story where he was right, a version where he was a good man doing the hardest thing a good man can do. But he was living inside the other version. He started drinking more. Well, not dramatically. No one who saw him at the school pickup line or at his business meetings would have noticed. 2 glasses of bourbon on weeknights instead of 1. Sometimes 3. It was the kind of drinking that has a reason. And the reason is that the quiet in a house where a woman used to check the locks 3 times a night is somehow worse than the checking was. Lily started failing her spelling tests. Lily, who had been an excellent speller. Her teacher, Ms. Hargrove, the same woman who had watched Renata speak to the class about Ukraine, called Thomas in for a meeting. Gentle meeting, concerned meeting. She chose her words carefully around the absence of Lily's mother. Thomas drove home from that meeting and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes. Then he called Carter Odom, his attorney and his oldest friend. He told Carter he needed to know his options. Carter, to his credit, said, "Thomas, are you sure? Because once you ask me that question, it's real." "I know." "She hasn't been there 2 weeks." "I know, Carter." "Give it time." "I don't think time is what's broken here." A long pause from Carter's end. "Okay," Carter said. "Come in Thursday." Word reached Renata on a Sunday. Not from Thomas. He hadn't come to the Tuesday visit that week. Not from Claudia, who was back in El Paso and calling Renata's mobile every day and getting routed to the ward desk. From Calloway Ridge's on-staff social worker, Ms. Priya Mehta, who sat across from Renata that Sunday morning and placed a manila envelope on the table between them. "Mrs. Solís, I want to—" "It's Captain Solís," Renata said. Still. "Captain Solís, I want to give you a moment before you open this." Renata looked at the envelope. She had been waiting for it. She opened it without visible reaction. Read the first page, set it back down, folded her hands on the table. He filed, Ms. Mehta said softly.
Oh, we can have the social work team. Is Lily with his parents? I believe so, yes. She's allergic to his mother's cat, the grey one. Did he remember that? Ms. Mehta blinked. I don't know. Can you call him and ask him to make sure Lily has her antihistamines? She won't ask for them herself because she doesn't want to make a fuss. Renata refolded the envelope. That's the most important thing right now. Ms. Mehta left the room. And Renata Solís. Alone?
All in a room with a locked door and a window facing a parking lot, sat completely still. And then she pressed both hands flat on the table and pressed until her arms shook. Because there is a kind of pain that has no sound, that lives entirely in the body, that a person who has been trained to operate in silence takes and holds and does not release. Not yet. Dr. Voss heard about the divorce filing through Miss Mehta. She came to Renata's room that evening outside scheduled session hours, but she knocked, opened the door. Renata was sitting on her bed, back against the wall, Lily's drawings spread out on the blanket in front of her. The woman at a window drawing, a sunshine drawing, a drawing of a dog they didn't own, but Lily had always wanted. You didn't have to come, Renata said. I know. Dr. Voss sat in the chair. I wanted to. A long silence. He made the right call, probably, Renata said. Given what he knows.
Given what he can see. That's very generous. It's not generous. It's accurate. He married a person who came home, someone different. He has a daughter to raise. He can't do that with a woman locked in a behavioral ward and a storyline he can't verify. Does it hurt? Renata looked at the drawings. Everything hurts, Dr. Voss. That's not the question. The question is whether the thing that's hurting you is worth the cost. And is it? A very long pause.
Or ask me again when someone believes me, Renata said. Dr. Voss looked at her, held her gaze. I've been looking into some things, she said carefully. Renata went very still. I submitted an inquiry, unofficial, through a contact I have at Walter Reed who works with interagency liaisons. Dr. Voss, I asked about the unit structure you described, about the cell composition, about the Kharkov operation window. I didn't use your name.
I framed it as a research case. They're not going to tell you anything. They didn't tell me anything. Dr. Voss leaned forward slightly. But they also didn't say there was nothing to tell. My contact went quiet for 4 days, then sent me one line. Renata looked at her. Dr. Voss said, she said, this isn't something I can discuss. Recommend you close this inquiry immediately. The room was completely silent. Renata breathed slowly. That's not a denial, she said. No, Dr. Voss said.
Or it isn't. On the 28th day of Renata's hold at Calloway Ridge, Dr. Voss submitted a formal amendment to her treatment file. She changed the primary diagnosis from delusional disorder, persecutory type, to complex PTSD with stress response features. Diagnosis under review. It was a small change on paper. It was enormous, in fact. Ward Director Dr. Hugh Callahan called her into his office the following morning. Mara, what are you doing? Updating my assessment based on ongoing evaluation? Her husband's legal team has already been in contact. They want documentation to support. Then they'll have to wait for documentation that's accurate. Dr. Callahan stared at her. You're making this very complicated. I'm not making anything, Dr. Voss said. I'm following the evidence. She stood, straightened her coat. And I think you should know, well, if I'm right about this patient, then this facility has been complicit in the institutionalization of a decorated combat veteran who was telling the truth. And I would like us to be on the right side of that before it becomes someone else's story to tell. She walked out. Dr. Callahan sat at his desk for a long time, then he picked up the phone. On the 41st day of Renata Solís's hold at Calloway Ridge Behavioral Health Center, two men arrived at the facility's front desk. They had no appointment. They carried identification that the front desk coordinator, Bev, later described as the kind you don't argue with and you don't run through your system because there's no system that would have it. They asked to speak with Dr. Mara Elise Voss. They were shown to a conference room. Bev called Dr. Voss's extension. "There are two men here for you," she said. "Dr. Voss, I don't know how to explain them. You need to come down." Dr. Voss walked into that conference room to find two men in civilian clothes. Well cut, unremarkable, the kind of clothes designed to be forgotten. One was approximately 40, dark-haired, with the physical stillness of someone who had trained their body to give nothing away. The other was older, late 50s, with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a file folder closed in front of him. The older man spoke first. "Dr. Voss, we appreciate you seeing us without notice. My name is Colonel James Ardent. This is my colleague. We're here regarding a patient currently in your care, Captain Renata Solís." Dr. Voss sat down. "I'd like to ask," she said, "how you know she's here? We've been aware of her location since day 4 of her admission." A beat. "Why did you wait 41 days? Colonel Ardent opened his file folder. "Because we needed to determine the extent of what she had disclosed. As Captain Solís was operating under a Level 4 classified communications restriction. This means that regardless of personal circumstances, she was not authorized to discuss the operation she participated in with any civilian party, including medical professionals. She needed help. Yes, she did." His voice carried the weight of someone who knew the cost of what he was saying. "And she will have it. But first I need to tell you several things." Dr. Voss folded her hands. "The operation Captain Solís described, with the Kharkov cell, the Volkov interdiction, the circumstances of the Ukrainian assets extraction failure, is a matter of classified record. It happened, substantially as she described it to you." The room was very, very quiet. The Ukrainian national she named, Vasil, was recovered 14 months after the mission. He is alive. He is currently in a protected resettlement program. Captain Solís does not know this. Dr. Voss exhaled slowly. "The 4 operatives she identified as cell members are real individuals who can be confirmed through sealed personnel records. The arms broker, Volkov, was neutralized in a separate operation 8 months after Kharkov." "She wasn't delusional," Dr. Voss said. "No." "She was never delusional." "No." "Then why?" Dr. Voss said, and her voice had an edge she did not try to remove. "Why is she in my facility? Why has she been here for 41 days? Why has her husband filed for divorce based on a medical record that calls her a paranoid delusional?" Colonel Ardent was quiet for a moment. "Because the communications restriction she was under prohibited her from providing documentation or requesting confirmation from any classified source, which meant that when she began exhibiting stress-related disclosure behaviors, talking about the operations, there was no mechanism in place for a civilian evaluator to verify her account." "That's a bureaucratic answer." "Yes," he said. "It is. And it is an inadequate one. I know that." The younger man, who had not spoken, reached into a bag and placed a sealed document on the table. "This is a formal declassification memo for the specific operational elements Captain Solís disclosed to you. It is retroactively dated to the day of her admission. It covers her medical team, this facility, and any legal proceedings that reference her statements. Dr. Voss looked at it. And what do I do with this? You release her, Ardent said. Today. Dr. Voss came to Renata's room herself. She didn't have the men with her. She came alone, but she sat in the chair, that same chair, and she put her yellow legal pad on her knee, and she looked at Renata Solís for a long moment. I need to tell you something, she said. Renata was still, waiting. There are 2 men downstairs. One of them is a colonel. They have documentation. Renata's jaw moved slightly, just slightly. They confirmed the operation. Kharkov, the cell, Bolkov, all of it. A very long silence. Vasil is alive, Dr. Voss said. He was recovered, and he's in a safe place. Renata turned her head to the window, and for the first time since her admission to Calloway Ridge, through the divorce papers, through the missed visits, through the sessions where she laid her trauma out in clinical sequence and watched it be written down as pathology, her face broke. Not dramatically, not loudly. This was not a movie moment. It was a woman, alone against a wall, treated with the quiet and complete collapse of someone whose body finally gets permission to feel what it has been holding for 4 years. He's okay, she said. He's okay. Renata pressed both hands over her mouth, breathed, and wept, silently, completely, the way only people who have never let themselves do it before can weep. Dr. Voss did not speak. She did not offer clinical comfort. She sat in the chair and bore witness, because sometimes that is the only honest thing left to do. Here is the thing about this story that you need to understand: the confirmation, the document, the kernel, the validation. That was not the resolution. That was the beginning of the second battle, because Renata walked out of Calloway Ridge that afternoon into a world where a man had filed for divorce based on a medical record that no longer said what it said, where a 9-year-old had been told her mother was sick in a way that children take into themselves and carry, where a decorated army intelligence officer had 41 days of her life stripped from her and handed to a diagnosis that was now, officially, documented, wrong. And now she had to go home to the wreckage and decide what to rebuild, if anything could be rebuilt at all. Renata Solís left Calloway Ridge on a Thursday afternoon. She walked out of the front entrance in the same navy coat she had walked in wearing 41 days earlier. Dr. Voss was at the door. The Colonel Ardent's car was in the parking lot. He had offered a formal military escort, a gesture meant to signal acknowledgement from the institution that had kept her operational details classified. Renata declined the escort. She asked instead if someone could call her a cab. Bev at the front desk was crying. She wasn't entirely sure why. She just knew that something about the woman walking through that lobby, upright, quiet, coat-buttoned, ties straightforward, demanded a kind of feeling that didn't have a name. "Your cab is outside, Captain," Bev said. "Thank you," Renata said, "for being kind to me." She got in the cab. She didn't go home. She went to the school first. She had called ahead. Ms. Hargrove had arranged it with the principal. Quiet, no fuss. Lily pulled from class just before lunch. Renata sat on a bench outside the main office. Lily came around the corner. She stopped when she saw her mother. When that particular stop, the 3-second freeze of a child who has wanted something so badly they can't immediately process its arrival, is a thing that Renata has described exactly once in a conversation with her sister the following year. She said, "She looked at me like she was checking if I was real. And I thought, That's what I must look like to the army. Real, but unverifiable. Then Lily ran, and Renata caught her and held on. And Lily said, I face pressed into her mother's neck, I knew your heart wasn't broken, I knew it. You were right, Renata said. It isn't. Is it fixed now? Getting there, Renata said. It's getting there. The divorce proceedings were complicated by the declassification memo. Carter Odom, Thomas's attorney, spent 2 days on the phone with legal representatives from a government entity whose name was not fully disclosed before he called Thomas into his office. The psychiatric evaluation on which you based the filing, Carter said carefully, has been formally amended. The original diagnosis was based on statements that have since been confirmed as factually accurate. Thomas stared at him. She was telling the truth, Carter said. All of it. The silence that followed that sentence lasted a long time. Thomas sat in Carter's office for over an hour. He didn't speak much, and he was doing what people do when something they believe to be solid ground opens underneath them. He was recalibrating, remapping every moment. Lily's crying, the food stacking in the kitchen, Renata at the window at midnight. She wasn't breaking. She was protecting us. She knew something was after her. She wasn't wrong. She spent 41 days in a locked facility, and I put her there, and she was right. He withdrew the divorce filing 3 days later. Let's be careful here. And because this is not a story that ends with a healed marriage and a family sitting around a table at Thanksgiving. Real life does not work that way, and this story is too important to give it an ending it didn't earn. Thomas and Renata began couples counseling in January with a therapist named Dr. Ondina Ferreira, who specialized in veteran family reintegration. The work was slow and painful and honest in the way that only work done by two people who still love each other can be. Thomas had to sit with what he had done. Not what he had intended. What he had done. There is a difference, and a man who is serious about his wife has to sit in that difference and not reach for comfort from the fact that he meant well. You stopped believing me, Renata said in one of those sessions. I need you to understand that the stopping was the injury, not the hospital. The stopping. I know, Thomas said. Do you? Yes, he said. I do, and I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Renata. And it wasn't fixed that day, but it was opened, and that is where repair begins. Dr. Mara Voss submitted a case study, anonymized, to the Journal of Military Mental Health 6 months after Renata's discharge. The article, titled Operational Disclosure in Combat Veterans, the Clinical Cost of Classification, argued for an interagency protocol that would allow mental health providers treating veterans to submit a confidential verification request to a designated military liaison. The article was rejected by 2 journals before it was published. It was then cited in a congressional subcommittee report on veteran psychiatric care. Whether anything will change as of this telling remains to be seen. Lily started sleeping through the night again in February. She asked her mother once what had really happened. Not the heart story, the real story. Renata looked at her daughter for a long time. I know things that I had to keep secret, she said. And the secret was so heavy that it started to look like I was sick. But I wasn't sick. I was carrying something. What happened to the thing you were carrying? Some of it got lighter. Some of it I'll carry forever. Does it hurt? Not as much as it used to, Renata said, because now someone knows I was carrying it. Lily thought about this. I always knew, she said. I know, baby, Renata said. I know. Captain Renata Solís was never formally apologized to by the institution that had her committed. The Army issued a record amendment. Calloway Ridge updated her file. The declassification memo was entered into her personnel jacket. Paperwork moved, bureaucracies adjusted, systems processed. No one said, "We were wrong and we are sorry and you deserved better." And perhaps that is the most military thing about this story. The mission gets completed, the records get corrected. But did the people involved go home? And the woman who held the line, alone, in a locked room, telling the truth to people who called it a hallucination, is expected to be grateful for the correction and move on. Renata Solís is not ungrateful, but she is not finished either. She is currently working with a veterans legal advocacy organization. She is learning to play guitar, badly, by her own account, and joyfully. And she is teaching Lily how to tell the difference between a person who doubts you and a person who is worth doubting yourself for. There is a difference, she says. Knowing it is the work of a lifetime. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment with just the word Calloway. No explanation needed. I'll know why. If you know someone who served and came home carrying something the world called madness, share this with them. They are not alone. They never were. And for more true stories of the forgotten, the wronged, and the unbreakable, you know where to find us. Silent Oath Stories. We carry what others won't say.